Okay, so um, thank you and welcome once again to everyone. We'll be starting off with our first presentation tonight, and I will call on the director of the National Center for Excellence in Sickle Cell Disease Research and Training at the University of Abuja, Professor Biagelin Nodu, to briefly introduce our first speaker. Prof, over to you, ma.
Okay, yes. Good evening, everyone. It's my singular honor, pleasure to welcome Professor Fatma Ebaid, whom I met in June this
Yeah,
year.
yeah.
Yes, so it's really wonderful because as I'm looking at your profile, we share some commonalities. Professor Ebaid she's a professor of pediatric hematology oncology and bone marrow transplant physician. She's the founder and director of the Faculty of Medicine and Shams Research Institute. It's a clinical research institute center that is in Al Shams University in Egypt. She's also a fellow of the Royal College of Pediatrics and Child Health. She has vast experience in clinical trials. And I know that when I met her, we had some interesting discussions about clinical trial. And I said, oh, I would really want to work closely with you, with regards to budgeting and all of those kind of issues. And we're looking forward to collaborating with you. I'm really delighted that at such short notice, you agreed, to come and give this. So on behalf of everyone, we've had an amazing 7 weeks of training on this IQVIA, clinical trial training course. So you are the eighth person. This is the eighth session, and we're delighted, to welcome you. On behalf of everyone, you're very welcome. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation. Thank you. Thank you.
Um, Good evening, everyone. It's always my pleasure to be with you and in this wonderful clinical trial training course. Okay. And it's thank you so much for your introduction to me. The honor is for me to be here with you and with all the fantastic professor and we, as you said, we share a lot. And I think after also my presentation, which will speak about the landscape of clinical research across Africa, we in the discussion we may discuss some of the common interests between me and you and all the speaker. And without further ado, it's my great honor to speak today about the landscape of clinical research across Africa. I will focus on the opportunity we have and the challenging we face. My overall overview about my presentation, I will speak roughly about the research, because it's a training course, about research, the value of clinical trial, the current situation of Egypt and Africa, what opportunity do we have, and what challenging we face, and how to overcome the challenge. Research, as you all know, is the cornerstone of any scientific progress. Science is very important, but education is the vector and vessel that transmits to every new generation the curiosity, the passion, the commitment which reimagine the future and extend the limit of the human. Research itself and research process is a systematic process, which is starting by identifying a problem and design your research question. Then you have to do your hypothesis and then the primary and second objective. Please, one of the success story is to have the primary endpoint, one primary endpoint, to have a clear answer for your research question. And please keep your secondary objective as few and related to the primary objective not to distract you from the primary objective, and don't have so much noise for your research. And then you draw your design according to your research hypothesis, and get all the required approval for your protocol. Then starting recruitment. When you starting recruitment, you starting by data collection, data analysis, processing, and at the end you have your report, writing, and presentation. But to start with, if you start good and starting very well, your research will be great. The first step is the research question, which clearly, crystal clear, identifying your aim and express what you as a researcher would like and wish to answer. Then design your protocol in a manner to answer this question. Please keep it simple, keep your design simple to have a clear, crystal clear answer. Criteria for a good research question, as you know, it should attempt to fill a knowledge gap, not just a repetition. And it need to be answerable, achievable within a time frame. And it should be, of course, related and relevant to your study objective, and it should meet the ethical standard. Any research question need to fulfill the BICO time criteria. You have to crystal clear identifying your population, your intervention, comparison, outcome within a time frame. But coming to Egypt and Africa, our national study should focus on our clinical needs, our local challenge. Then it should prioritize our intervention. There is many sources to have a good research question, literature, previous research, journal, conference, but one of the most important is patient observation, your clinical experience. As we always said, you cannot be what you cannot see. And a good physician is a good observer. And I also quote what a successful researcher and a Nobel Prize winner said, Erdem said, to be a successful researcher, one need to be both a hard worker and a hard thinker. So we need to be a good physician, a hard worker, a good observer, and a hard thinker. And once you draw your research question, you need to do what we call data collection form. It need to be starting very early with your research design, and it should be clear, valid, reliable, and most important, need to be relevant to your question. Why it need to be relevant? Because with this data, you at the end of your research attempt to answer this question. One of a good strategy is to have, after you starting your study, collecting some data, to have a pilot, to assess this data collection form too early, before it being too late to correct something. Look at what need to be added, what need to be removed, what need to be modified, and then collecting your data. And when you finish your recruitment, you need to do what we call data cleaning process, check for any data error, any outlier, and then do the data management and finish your data analysis and then write your report. I always like this. In God only we trust. Every other person need to bring data. People could have data without information, but you will never, never have information without data. But this is the data. It may be non-organized, it may be not useful. Data in itself without organization is not a crystal or not a gold. So when you have this data non-organized and just send it to the statistician to have a result, it's like what we call garbage in, garbage out. You will have a weak result, not a very good power. But if you sort it, arrange it, and present it visually, now we have some good information. But it will be an excellent if you explain it with a story. Say why this result came. Is it because of the characteristic of the patient? Is it because the challenge we have in Africa? What I mean that your data need to be explained with a story, with our own story. And of course, in the data, we have to have a good data practice. The data has to be accurate, clear, reported in timely manner, legible, identifiable, and validated. But we will focus in this course about the clinical trial. The clinical trial attempt to investigate the safety and efficacy of a new intervention to prevent, detect, treat, and manage various disease or medical condition. The WHO also defined the clinical trial as any research study that prospectively assign a human participant or a group of a human to one or more of a health-related intervention to evaluate the effect on health outcome. The clinical research study could be a prevention trial that attempt to prevent the disease to happen in the first place or prevent its recurrence. It could be a screening trial where we test a screening methodology to detect a disease. It could be a diagnostic trial. It could be a behavioral study, quality of life trial, or it could be a treatment study when we examine certain experiment drug or biological procedure or surgical and medical procedure. This experimental drug is a pharmaceutical form of an active substance that been testing as a reference to test the safety and efficacy, or it may be repurposing in different indication, or it been tested in a different way, or it could be used in a different population to ensure it's safe, like most of the pediatric study. The clinical trial differ from the standard of care as it intended to improve the standard of care, and it's focused on unknown effect of intervention. Participants usually join the RCTs when the available standard of care option are failed or not tolerated. Also, the clinical research intended to answer, as we said, a specific research question. The benefit it is for the future patient. The time frame and assessment have to be linked to the protocol, and we have to stick to that protocol, and patient must sign an informed consent. The medical practice or the standard of care, it intended to the need for this particular individual. It's real-time decision. It has the flexibility. The assessment as needed is not that linked to a protocol, but it's linked to the guideline for the treatment. Also, that the clinical trial assess the uncertain or unproven benefit for the patient, but the standard of care, the medication has to be accepted as safe and effective. Also, the placebo is only in the clinical trial, not in the standard of care. There is many, the clinical trial, we have to start towards preclinicals, either lab and the lab and then the animal, and then the phases. As we see, the phase 1, when we go in the phases, the duration extended, the number of patients increased. In the phase 1, we ask ourselves, is it safe? How does the body process this medication, and what is the side effect? In the phase 2, we ask ourselves, is it safe? But we ask ourselves also how well it works in our body, and we're starting to select the dose in phase 2. In phase 3, we ask ourselves how well it works, and is it the benefit from this medication outweigh the risk? Mainly phase 3 asking about efficacy and then safety. Phase 1 and phase 2 are asking about safety. And if it's the benefit outweighing the risk, then we applying for the FDA approval, and then go, if it's approved, we go for phase 4. Why we go for phase 4? Because we need a larger number, and we ask ourselves, is it still safe? Is there a rare side effect? Is it cost effectiveness? This what we call the standard FDA designation, but we have also the orphan designation. The orphan designation have the R&D grant, have the tax credit, just to encourage the pharmaceutical company to invest in the orphan designation. Also, we have the fast track where we have frequent communication, and the FDA started reviewing after phase 1, not phase 3. The accelerated approval where we have what we call surrogated rather than an endpoint, the priority review, and the breakthrough therapy. As you all know that we may in the lab have 10,000 compound, and then this compound like 250 only went to the clinical, or less than this, like 5 going to phase 3, and we may end by only one FDA approved treatment. Is very long, and it's very expensive and very complicated pathway. The clinical trial play a critical role in developing and delivering breakthrough medical treatment, but this long way, why we could need to go for this, why we really need to go for a clinical trial. As we said, we need to go for the clinical trial because we need to know that this intervention is safe and effective, and it's work well in the human, and what happened the best, which intervention work best for population. And most of the medical intervention we treated by the patient now in standard of care are a result of clinical trial. But what we really, the value of the clinical trial. The value of clinical trial not only for the patient, but it's also for the clinician, for the healthcare institute, for the government, economy, and society. For the government and economy, the society, it's provide an alternative cost-saving solution which relieve the public health system. I will give an example about the iron chelation therapy that our site in Ain Shams in Egypt participated in. We participated in most of the DIFRA-Xerox study in patient with thalassemia, and also with the FreeProne study. This is study, the first extension study, which was a randomized control study asking about the safety and efficacy of Gefriprone in iron overload patient with sickle cell disease. 33 centers in 9 countries were participated. Our site in Egypt, led by Professor El Alfa and myself, was the highest recruiter site. In this RCT, the life of this patient has been improved, and because of the iron overload has been treated. Also, the clinical trial enhances the local industry. Here I will give 2 examples of the African lead clinical trial, which have impact on the global health. The African Pharmaceutical Technology Foundation, which strengthens the bilateral initiative between the BioNTech and the Senegal Pasteur Institute for the production of COVID vaccine production. What is I like about this collaboration, this foundation, not only the collaboration between the 2 parties, but it invests in sustainable local capacity. Another successful story which was the ART free treatment for HIV by the South Africa, which gave a promising result and been presented in the conference of retrovirus and opportunistic infection in March 2025. It is a promising HIV treatment and one of the first HIV cure clinical trial in Africa. Also, for the society, it's enhances the development of a strong talent which leads the future local industry. Also, it attracts the pharma, as we said, to invest in developing drug for neglected and orphan disease. What about the patient? The patient in the clinical trial have an access to innovative therapy, as we already mentioned. They treated according to international guideline. They offer a free of charge investigation. They improve the life of thousands of people. And I got this picture from the SOHO 2022 annual meeting when the speaker speak about the acute lymphoblastic leukemia Philadelphia positive. And one of the line of treatment, she said, clinical trial whenever possible. Also in the pediatric oncology, the 5-year survival rate has been improved in all kind of pediatric cancer. One of the reasons for this improvement is the strong spirit for international collaboration among academic investigators and the mindset for caring of these pediatric children in RCT setting. And if you still doubt about the value of clinical trial, just remember the insulin in type 1 diabetes, the penicillin. Also, the clinical trial, the prospective RCT, decrease the treatment failure and improve the efficacy of a specific indication. If we go for the pediatric severe aplastic anemia, and in evaluating the L thrombobag, the starting of L thrombobag and duration of L thrombobag, on top of the ETG and the cyclosporine. In the first cohort in this study, they started the L thrombobag in day 14 because of they fear about the hepatotoxicity, the overlapping hepatotoxicity as the patient receiving ETG and cyclosporine. And they give it the L thrombobag for 6 months. And then in cohort 2, when they found in cohort 1 that most of the clinical response came in the first 3 months, so they stopped the L thrombobag after 3 months. And after this, they found that the hepatotoxicity are infrequent. So in the cohort 3, they started the L thrombobag from day 1. And they found that the clinical response were less when we stopped the L thrombobag at the 3 months. So they extended to 6 months. I know this course is like a training course, so I need the junior staff to know how we think when we build our research design. This research design and cohort beautifully explain how we define and organize our research question. If we think about the hepatotoxicity, then they defer the L thrombobag, but when they found that there is no hepatotoxicity or infrequent hepatotoxicity, they started from day 1. Also, as we already mentioned, that phase 4, we ask ourselves, is it still this drug is safe? Is there is rare adverse event? Why we do this even after we have the FDA approval? We at our center and many sites in Africa participated in the Voxelotor study, and it show in the phase 1, phase 2, and even phase 3 a very wonderful response, and it got accelerated FDA even approval. And after this, it show some of rare complication and increased mortality, then the drug being withdrawn. So the clinical trial by all its phase 1, 2, 3, 4, post-marketing, observation, real time, it's very important to improve the standard of care. So sometimes the patient came to us and say, why I could join the clinical trial, what get benefit? As we said, access to innovation, better quality of life, improve life, and offer the best, the potentially better treatment, and it allow contribute for the advancement of knowledge and cure for some disease. But we have to say to our patient that clinical trial now are secure because it conducted within the framework of ethics and regulation. What about the clinician? The clinician gain knowledge, opportunity for scientific publication. This is some of the publication our site and Ain Shams has been shared in. A lot of publication in Q1. Also the clinical trial, we have in the evidence-based medicine, the primary study, the RCT, the randomized control study came on the top of the pyramid for the primary study, and then for the secondary study, the meta-analysis came on the top. Also, the clinician gain the first-hand, what we call the first-hand experience with innovative drug, advance their scientific knowledge, then when they advanced their scientific knowledge, now they could draw an investigator-initiated study, draw their own clinical trial. This one of the investigator-initiated study conducted by one of our eminent professor, investigating the safety and efficacy of SOFLAB as a treatment for children with HIV during their course of treatment, and it's been published in one of the esteemed journal. Another study which investigating the role of glutamine in reducing the vaso-occlusive crisis, and it add on the what is already known. It study also the quality of life, filling the gap about the role of glutamine improving the quality of life, and the TCD and its role in the stroke prevention. Also, the institute has an access to the current know-how, the technology, the cutting-edge therapy, and it also improve involving in a clinical trial setting, improve the institution infrastructure. One of the implementation investigator-initiated study has been conducted at our site, led by myself, was an implementation of automated erythrocytophoresis for patients with sickle cell disease. The idea came in 2016. We started recruitment in December 2017, and still till now we are continuing recruiting, and we publish this story on this implementation study in the Transfusion and Apheresis Science Journal. Also, when we started thinking about the clinical trial and the importance of clinical trial in 2016, we have the idea to have a dedicated clinical research center, and then we established our unit shortly. In 2018, we have the accreditation from the Ministry of Health. We officially opened in 2020, and then renewal our accreditation 2022 and 2024. From this only 5 years or less, we now have around 20 studies ongoing, completed around 40 RCTs, and 100 in the startup, and 100 of investigator-initiated study. All of this clinical trial activity belonging to the CRC in Ain Shams, improving the infrastructure of the university at home. This wonderful study, which testing also the hypothesis that if we treating patient with acute lymphoblastic leukemia with the same protocol in a clinical trial setting and non-clinical trial setting, the outcome should be similar. But surprisingly, the patient with a standard risk who treated inside outside the clinical trial setting have an inferior 5-year survival than those who are treating inside the clinical trial setting, and this underscores the need to identify the need for further improvement in centering, not recruiting, not enrolling patients in prospective collaborative RCTs. Also, a very good example about how the RCTs and how the clinical research improving the infrastructure. It's a partnership for African vaccine manufacturing, which has an objective to advance the vaccine development and manufacturing in Africa. The success is about strengthening the local capacity and promoting the African lead health innovation. Again, the value of clinical trial on an institution is allowing for an international collaboration between universities. What I like about the anti-COVID clinical trial, which has an objective to identify effective treatment for mild and moderate COVID cases in Africa, that's being conducted in 13 countries and with 19 sites, and it's enrolled over than 2,000 to 3,000 participants. It was a wonderful collaboration between African country, International Research Center, and organization like the Drug for Neglected Disease Initiative and the African CDC. Also, in the same context, we are in Ain Shams participating in the global registry for COVID in children with cancer, and it has been published in the Lancet Oncology. Also, Egypt, representing by Ain Shams and many other African countries, has been participated in ABOT collaboration with Endemic Defense Coalition and pathogen discovery. Also, we participated with the UCL in the acceptability of pregnant women to receive treatment for hepatitis C. Also, in the same context about collaboration, there is a wonderful collaboration between an Indian-based CRO and a Kenyan-based CRO. This collaboration allows for the investment by a pharmaceutical company in a new therapeutic development, and it's allow for expansion of both service offering by both CRO. Also, the One Health unit or One Health activity in Egypt, represented by Ain Shams and many other countries. Also, the virtual hospital in our institution with a teleconference consultation to patient in 20 countries. This virtual hospital, if it replicated in many countries in Africa, it could be the use for adaptive and remote clinical trial design, which overcomes the logistic challenging we face in Africa. So the value of clinical trial in the healthcare institute assess in building capacity and consistency of clinical care and MDT setting, increase in international collaboration, access to current technology, and answering the safety and efficacy of drug and device, and it improves the institution infrastructure. So what about the viewpoint for Egypt and Africa? We are in Egypt around 120 million. 75% of these people are young age, younger than 40, and I guess it's the same for most of the African country. We are a growing country with the youth are the main power. We have GDP of around 6. We have an expanded healthcare facility between the Ministry of Health, Education, and University. And we have the healthcare investment increasing in the last year, saying all of this, and Egypt may be leading the clinical trial in the region. We have a few reputable CRCs in the country. We have a few people and few researchers full-time only for the clinical research. And I guess the same in most of the African countries. So what opportunity, what characteristic we have? We have our location. We have an attractive healthcare infrastructure. We have the education, the institutional support, the collaboration, and we also have the fast-growing, largely treatment-naive population. We have this mosaic panel, and we have this genetic diversity. We have also what we call the untapped market. We have also low cost of living. We have it all, putting Africa in a very good place to have a large share in the clinical trial field. But also, we have some challenge. This challenge is like administrative, mostly logistic for importing, exporting the trial supply, the lab kit, the drug, and also one of the most important challenging unharmonized regulation. We don't have like the European same regulation for every country, but in Africa, every single country have its own regulation for the clinical trial. We have also the lengthy regulatory framework. The startup timeline may be long and the country being dropped. Also, in some country, you have limited infrastructure, insufficient fund, limited access marketing, regulatory site, and lack of online registry, and I will talk about this later. And in some areas, there is lack of culturally, there is lack of clinical research awareness. Also we have what we call brain drain phenomena. The young investigator leaves their country and going for better opportunity. This is showing us that the Middle East have less than 1% of what we call the global clinical trial spend in the clinical trial. This 1% increase in the market representing million investment and million job and thousand job for the country and thousand treatment for the patient. There is some what we call trending. Egypt was leading at certain point in time. Last 2 years, there is a little bit down trending. South Africa are rising. And here what we call the African clinical trial market. We expected that the market has been increasing in the coming year. The driver are that we have a chronic condition and we also have the demand for a cost effectiveness product. This is why the market has been increasing in the last few years, but phase 1 study is very minimal. If we see that this is the phase 1 study and it's dropping in the last 2 years, the main participant was Egypt. This is why in the last 2 years it started to be dropped, because we have limitation in the last 2 years about the phase 1 study. The patient registry, it's very minimal and very low. The recruiting, we have from the clinicaltrial.gov, most of the study were completed, few are recruiting. And from this who are recruiting, mainly in the field for the infection, HIV, hepatitis, and like this. And if we go for the African children, which is like half of the population, if we go for this, we will find that the percentage of clinical trials that included children are low, and it's mainly in the North Africa, Egypt specifically, and in West Africa it's like 1%. So what the sponsor need, what attracts the pharma for a country? The regulatory, the patient pool, and the quality of data. They need to know that we have a very good quality of data, and we have a patient pool, and in the same time a regulatory environment. Also the cost and the running cost, and here we need to have what we call the finance department, which is regulating all the costs for the clinical trial. This financial department will review the contract, will have the fair market price for you, will do the invoicing, and will do all of this related to money. This is Egypt. In 2007 we have the first regulatory, and in 2020 the first CRCs, and in 2018 we have our CRCs, the second one, and in 2020 we have the first clinical law release for the public to address. And now the most important part in the talk. How can African country better position their unique demographic, disease burden, genetic diversity as an asset for the global drug development? Number one, to do an analysis, see what our weakness and what our strengths, what our threat and what our opportunity, to go for what we call SWOT analysis, and to go for an online registry, tracking the study application. And I will talk about registry because we in Africa we have many registry, and to have a networking, African clinical research networking, and a patient referral networking. Also to invest in the research infrastructure, the lab, the institution. What I found great, because I came from I've been participating in the clinical trial like for 20 years. I've been participating in the clinical trial in the department, the pediatrics department, the hematology, and I've been developed and founding a dedicated CRCs. What I found the most is to have a dedicated CRCs. When we have a dedicated clinical research center, we don't have this headache to implement a clinical pharmacy for a clinical research in every department, pediatric, adult, oncology. If we have one, this is will secure our resources, and we'll have a full dedicated team. And also, when we're speaking about infrastructure, research infrastructure, local research infrastructure, it's not only the lab, the clinical, it is the local talent, it is the people. When you investing in the people and retain them, not only train them, because we trained the people and then they left, brain drain. So we need to have the training and retaining, and to have an environment friendly for those young population, young researcher to stay. We need only to foster the genetic diversity, to act on this part, molecular study, to have a target and precise medicine targeting for our population, because like we have in sub-Saharan Africa the most population for sickle cell disease. And when they study the glutamine, for example, they study the glutamine in USA, all the participants and all the site were from America, none from the US, from sub-Saharan Africa. And then the treatment for the sickle cell disease came to our patient non-tested, and we don't know how is it working the same, is our genetic diversity will affect. So we need to act on this genetic diversity. And also we have to develop a relevant research priority. Need to see, as we said, for the research question in the first part. This is why I almost start my presentation about the research question. We need to have this prioritizing for the research, what we call the research priority. Also, we have to improve the regulatory framework. This is one of the most important part, like for Egypt, harmonize regulatory process, fasting the regulatory process, fasting the importation, exportation of sample and lab kit. Also engage the community with you, and we'll speak about this, adherent to international standard, improving the research environment. And again, involve early, because most of the African country involving as a rescue country when they cannot recruit patients from Europe and USA, and then they came to us like a rescue country. We need to involve early, to be in the kitchen when the protocol has been designed, to put our input when they design the protocol, they design the schedule of event, and go outside the comfortable zone, which is like HIV, Ebola, and other, and malaria. We need to, there is no magic inside the comfortable zone. There is no firework. We need to go beyond this comfortable zone about the infection and related disease. Use the infrastructure that has been developed for the infection disease for other clinical trial. And also, if we look for the treatment to go and the drug go for the clinical for the African country, 61% are imported. So we need to use the clinical trial to develop the medicine locally in Africa, and to work more on the R&D part, and to engage the public-private partnership. And to engage the public-private partnership, we have to clear objective. It's like a win-win situation, and to have an equitable partnership. Use this private sector in a long-term commitment. Use them for capacity building and training. Use them in the infrastructure. Use them in the funding. Use them in regulatory support. And most important, use them in talent retention strategy, like research funding, foster research-friendly environment, because it's one of the most challenging is brain drain for the successful and young generation. And if this is like a 6 intervention which promotes the clinical trial, one of them is patient-centric virtual trial, because the trial itself is like complicated and complex. If we have flexible monitoring, flexible what we call comprehensive risk-based monitoring, it will allow us for quality, efficiency in a timely manner, and it also will overcome some of the challenging we already have. Also, they said access untapped market like an Africa, just to use the diversity. We need to knock more on the pharmaceutical company. Actually, the pharmaceutical companies speak a lot about diversity, but not working very hard on that. Also to have our data in sorting the trial in a blockchain registry. And I speak 2 times in the presentation about the important to have an African registry, to have an African clinical trial registry. And I said, and when we search, I found one of the most important one is the clinical trial community. It is a wonderful online platform. Combines the site, can register their previous and ongoing clinical trial. It have wonderful analysis. Could be used from this platform. It allow for exposure. Now it's very fine and it's very fantastic. We have what we need, the clinical trial community register. Then, look, we have the Pan-African Clinical Trial Registry. It allows for more or less the same. And also we have the African Vaccine Regulatory Forum. And we have the Science for Africa. And also we have the Africa Research Excellence Fund. And we have many, many, many registry, NGO, online networking. Please, fragmentation weakening us. Our power in Africa lie in number. We need one, like the clinicaltrial.gov. We need one, just one for all Africa. And I speak a lot, and my take-home message is that be part of the progress. Research is strengthened by international collaboration. By implementation all of this strategy, African country can effectively position their unique asset as a valuable contribution to the global drug development. Ultimately, it will improve the health outcome for the local population and beyond. And thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Professor Ebed. This was wow. When you are reading out the numbers of the clinical trials being done at your center, I was just wondering. Thank you so much for the perspective. This is, well, I don't know how to describe it, but this has really opened our eyes to so many things. And thank you for some of the resource links that you shared about things happening in Africa. This was really very wonderful. Thank you so much. And I'm sure most of us will agree with me. While you were speaking, there were some questions on the chat, but in the course of your presentation, you answered them. There was a question on how does genetic diversity help with clinical trials in Africa. You had already answered it with the last set of slides that you presented. Yeah. So I know you're 1 hour ahead of us, but I want to plead that you stay online because we're about to have a panel discussion. We shouldn't last too long. And we also would like to have your perspective to some of the questions that the panelists will be answering, especially as regards clinical trial budgeting. Okay, with your experience, it would be nice to have your perspective there. So I'll plead that you stay online. And then if there are any other questions, when they come in at the end, if they apply to you, then you can help us address the questions. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So we will move on now to all participants. We're going to move on now to the panel discussion. And I have the honor to invite people who have been involved in clinical trial within Nigeria to help us address some of the questions that pertain to budgeting. So in our panel this night, we'll have Professor Obiagelin Nodu, we have Professor Biobele Brown, we have Dr. Sheye Akinshete, we have Dr. Yvonne. I hope I don't make a mistake in the pronunciation of the name. Professor Yvonne De Adumako from Ghana. And we have an account officer, because when Professor Bed was presenting, she talked about the fact that it's good to have a dedicated center where you have everything and people don't have to, you don't have to crack your head about certain things. So we know that clinical trial involves accounts, invoicing and all that. So we have Malama Minu, who is from the University of Abuja, as part of this panel. So I'll ask that the admin should ensure that the panelists that I've listed have the ability to unmute themselves to talk. Okay, so let me just repeat: Professor Biagelin Nodu, Professor Biobele Brown, Dr. Sheye Akinshete, Professor Yvonne De Akomo, and Malam Aminu. So we'll start off now, and I will throw the first question to Professor Yvonne De Adomako. Prof, good evening and welcome. I hope you can hear me.
I can hear you very
Okay.
well. Good evening to
You're most
everyone.
welcome.
Good to
So,
be here.
I would like you to give us an idea of what the basic components of a trial budget entails. We know usually these budgets are either brought by the sponsor or the CRO, and they ask the PI to look at it and all that. So what are the basic components? Because this training is tailored towards engaging sites or preparing sites to get themselves ready for clinical trials. So there are a lot of trial naive sites on the platform, and they will want to know what are the basic components of a clinical trial budget. Over to you, ma'am.
Okay, thank you very much. And I'm very happy to be here. Thanks, Fatima. That was an excellent talk. And I like all the trials that you're doing. What I'm waiting for is a time where the rest of Africa will be included on so many clinical trials. Definitely need to have infrastructure and a whole lot of things before we can get on board. A few of us are doing clinical trials in a very small way. So I'll go on to the question that has been asked. I want all of us to know that budgeting is actually a critical step in clinical trial planning. If you want your trial to be successful, then your budget must be right. You must be able to manage your financial risks and your regulatory compliance. Now, the key budget components. First of all, you need to submit a startup budget. And your startup budget, everything that you don't have on site. Sometimes I realize that we Africans, we really don't have a lot of things on site. Things like in Ghana, the Ghana FDA requires that you have a fireproof cabinet. A fireproof cabinet costs about 2,000 USD for one, and it's not even big enough. So you may have to have two if you are recruiting a lot. So that must go in your startup budget. If you are using infusion pumps, that should go in your startup budget. All the accessories that go with the infusion pump. Find someone who is going to supply all that to your site throughout the duration of your trial. Then also certain things like informed consent, you must charge for that. Adverse events that may occur. In Africa, once a participant is on a clinical trial, they expect that you pay for their adverse events, their stay in hospital if they have a serious adverse event and they are admitted. You have to pay for it. If there's a death that occurs, they expect a lot from you as well. All that should be budgeted for. The phlebotomy that will be done, you need to pay your laboratory personnel. And so that phlebotomy, you must charge for it. Everything that has to do with sampling, the transfer of samples to a refrigerator, if you need a -80, you must charge for it. If they can supply all that to you, that is great. Your personnel costs, all the other investigators, how do you pay your sub-investigators? How do you pay yourself as an investigator? They send you a template, and what they have on it is investigator fee. That investigator fee is supposed to cover yourself as the principal investigator, as well as your co-investigators. So make sure that you negotiate very well, because that is the same amount, the same money that you are going to share between yourself and your co-investigators. The coordinator, your study coordinator, will have his or her own charge as well. And mind you, for the investigators, it must be charged per hour. Your study nurses must be paid as well. So per hour, whatever your study nurse is doing, you must document it very well and send an invoice for them to be paid. Patient costs. For some sites, if you don't have, let's say, a sickle cell clinic or any other clinic where you are recruiting from and you have to recruit from outside, you must pay people at the other facilities to be able to recruit for your site. If you are recruiting from your site, that makes it easier, but then you must compensate your participants for their travel time, the stay in hospital. You must compensate them. And so you need to take, certain things into consideration, how far your participants live. So you can use an average and then be able to budget for your participants. Any other study supplies that are needed, equipment-wise. So as I mentioned earlier, if you need a -80, put it in your budget. Ask the sponsor to supply that to you. If you need any accessories or infusion pumps, if it has to be, the IMP is an infusion, you need infusion pumps, you may need filters, you may need a special giving set, you must budget for all that. You must have a supplier in the sub-region or in your home country who can supply throughout the trial period. If you need ECG or TCD machines, you must ask sponsor to supply them to site. Sometimes we forget that for sampling and for preparation of some of the samples, you need a good centrifuge. You may need a refrigerated centrifuge. You don't have it on site. Ask sponsor to supply them for you. And then your regulatory and administrative costs. If you have an administrative staff who is working with you, you must be able to pay that person. That person is going to do legwork. He's going to arrange your files for you. He's going to make sure that your study documents are all in one place and filed properly. You have an accountant on your trial. You must find a way of paying that accountant. And so that must also go into your costs. Then the regulatory IRB. I don't know how much is charged in other places. In Ghana, they charge as high as $2,000. And so you must, what I do is that I insist that sponsor pays for the IRB directly. If you want me to pay, then I have to add all the charges that the bank will charge when the transfer is made to the amount that sponsor has to pay. So all these components must be in your budget. And don't forget your overheads. There may be other things that you have forgotten. You must be able to find money from somewhere to pay for them. So these are some of the key budget components that are very important when you are preparing a budget for a clinical trial. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. Thank you very much.
Could I have an input or to wait till the end?
Sorry.
Absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely.
Yes.
That's why you're here,
Yeah.
Professor. That's
Yeah.
why you're here. Please. Yes.
Because when they send and يعني excuse me everyone, because it was I would like to have a presentation about budgeting, because it's very, very important part, but it was, for me, it was very short notice to arrange for a talk about the budgeting. But let me put myself in the position of the sponsor and being realistic. When I ask for send you the feasibility questionnaire, in the feasibility questionnaire they ask some question. They ask about the principal investigator. Uh, does he or she participated in a clinical trial, blah, 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 to ensure that the staff are well equipped. And then they ask about the institution. They ask some of the question about do you have a refrigerator? Do you have a centrifuge? Do you have blah, 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 blah? And if you answer all the question like no, okay, you could use the startup fees when the study started to bring this equipment. But for me as an investigator, as a sponsor, I may thought that this site is not well equipped. So, and also another point is like when you have a site in this clinical trial and you said I don't have -80, I don't have in the sickle cell trial, I don't have this and that and that, and then you equipped, and then you go for a neurology study, and again this site is not have 1, 2, 3, 4, and then they equipped. You like inventing the wheel. We are not so rich to have so many -80 or to have so many centrifuge. And this is the most important. I know that most of the people here are a stakeholder. This is our job to work to have a dedicated clinical research center. It will trust me. I came from a background that I work in the department and have only one fridge and a locker which is not secure, and then I shifted to found a clinical research center. It answers all this question, and it leaves the principal investigator, a sub-investigator, acting on what they really would like to act on the researcher. It gives the time for the researcher just to focus on the research and not go for all of this hassle. You have one centrifuge, it will work for all the clinical trial, pediatric, adult, and oncology, sickle cell disease. So maybe it's time now, yesterday, not just today, to have a dedicated, not a research center, big one. Already I only have an archiving room and for ongoing trial, and a big archiving room for the closed trial. I have two pharmacists, have 4 refrigerator and 1 -80, which is not like a huge. But when the sponsor asks me, I have it all. I have 1 ECG and 1 backup ECG. I have 1 infusion and another infusion. So you may have a grant or something to have these CRCs. And be careful when you have the feasibility questionnaire and say it all, no, 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 because it's maybe what we, to start with, do what we call the subcontracting. Look in your whole institution, whole hospital, where I could find just one -80, and do a subcontracting, like renting, where I have ECG, definitely the ECG will be found in the cardiology department, do a subcontracting. And then what one of the an advice I give to have a standard operating procedure, which is fixed. You could negotiate with the sponsor, but this is your own SOPs, which have the breaking the budget like 30% overhead to the institution. This 30% overhead will allow for infrastructure, the electricity, bringing equipment, and then in the SOBs you will have doctor what we call the breakdown of the fee, because the sponsor giving the overhead and the 70%, let us say, for the clinical trial staff, all the staff. It's your SOBs which will divide it this like by percent. The BI will take 40%, the sub-investigator will take 20%, and this is fixed by the SOPs. In the SOPs also, you have the referral time. You have the overnight spent on the hospital, and you have also what we call unconditional procedure, which need to also be not only in the budget plan from the start, the unconditional procedure, which some stuff that will pop off, phone call, death, serious adverse event, emergency. So all of this need to be put in your budget, and you need to know, because maybe some of the junior staff ask, how could I know the price? Mostly it's the fair market, what we call fair market price. Go for the ECG and take part by the lowest price and the highest price, and midway between this. This is what we call the fair market price. I'm sorry for interrupting the professor when she's about to speak.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. That's quite enlightening. Thank you also, Prof.
Yes, but
Yeah.
can I add something else?
Okay, please.
Yeah. Yes. So for sites that are just starting, sometimes some of the pharmaceutical companies are ready to help that site, especially when you have a high prevalence of whatever disease they are trying to do a trial on. So it is really time for you to build your lab, and you can actually get a lot of equipment from these trials. But I also want to say that sometimes when they come to other parts of Africa, after the trial, they take their equipment back. A few pharmaceutical companies may leave some equipment with you, of course, if you make a case for it, but they take the equipment back. So how then do you build capacity? From other trials that you are on, you can use part of that money to acquire some equipment for your own lab, so that, just as Fatima said, when they send you that feasibility questionnaire, you don't have to take no for everything. If you have certain things, that is great. But if you don't have it, and you have a high prevalence of the disease, and they really want to use your site, they definitely will support your site. At least that is what I have been doing, and I have gotten some support from some pharmaceutical companies, and I have been able to set up my own lab for clinical trials. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So we'll quickly move on now. Professor Nodu, the next question is for you. Please, can you enlighten us based on your experience with negotiations with sponsors and CROs, how one or how we can ensure some minimum benchmarks and fair market value? Professor Ebed has already talked about fair market value for sites in our own environment. Over to you, ma.
Yeah, thank you very much. I must say that I have actually enjoyed listening to Professor Fatma and Professor Yvonne. Thank you so much for those wonderful insights. This is exactly what this is all about. So, the question how we can ensure minimum benchmarks and fair market value for sites in our environment. Sometimes when we talk about fair market value, I think maybe justice is not being done, to this, especially those of us who work in this kind of environment. Because you have an international clinical trial and investigators are recruiting across 60 countries globally. And then when they talk about fair market value, the cost, or the patient cost is differing so much that you cannot even understand what is going on. The second international funded clinical trial I did was in 2012 with a South African CRO. They set the price and we just went along. At that time, I was given the impression that budgets for clinical trials a matter between the PI and the CRO and not openly discussed even with team members. So what happens? I don't know how it is in Egypt. I don't know how it is in Ghana, but they give you a template and they put all the prices there. And you can take up to 1 year just going back and forth. And sometimes I feel that they're trying to wear you down intentionally. I don't know if this is the experience of other people, but we found, in about 2022 here in Nigeria, that there was a wide variability in cost, not only between countries for the same study, but also between sites in the same country. So a bunch of Nigerian PIs, we got together and decided to have a minimum benchmark for procedures, trusting the one among us that has a diaspora experience to lead the way. So sites that went on their own were offered much lower rates, which they accepted because they didn't know what was happening. So I think we can ensure minimum benchmarks and fair market value when we are open, when we are collaborative, when we ask questions, when we exchange experiences, while respecting the NDAs that we signed. So, and of course, if we have the privilege of sitting in advisory boards, we should keep advocating. So what Professor Yvonne just said, I feel very grieved in my heart that we had a clinical trial for 3 years and then they're taking all the equipment away. I don't think it is right. Our regulatory agency does not encourage that. And we have to talk a little bit more about some of these things as we meet the sponsors, because I don't really know what goes on between the sponsor and the CRO. Sometimes when you talk to the sponsors, they make you feel that they are willing to support. Then the CRO does not give that impression that they are willing to support. But I think we will just continue dialoguing, continue advocating, because just like Professor Ibed said, if you say you don't have, then you're not going to be chosen. You understand? So when you talk about setup budget, they fix the setup price. They fix it in the budget, and you cannot even touch it as it were. So I found over time, for some reason, that suppliers tend to give higher prices for goods they sell in Nigeria than other countries. And when it comes to clinical trials, the patient costs are higher outside of Nigeria. So we have to begin to compare notes, with other people and see, what are they getting? And then can they share their budget, for instance? And maybe the answer would be when we have this single African, clinical trial organization, and then we harmonize and standardize everything, within that platform. So it is for this reason really that we have invited Professor Fatma, to come and talk with us, and of course Professor Yvonne, so that we can share, ideas on the best way to go forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ma. Thank you very much, Ma. The next person that we want to address, share his experience is Professor Bill Belle Brown. We know that clinical trial is more like reimbursement. So it's not like a grant. They don't give you money to do the work. They reimburse you for the work done. So can you share experience of how you've been navigating things like participant reimbursements, or even when there are local lab tests to be done, effecting those payments until the sponsor pays you? Because sometimes, or the CRO, until the money is released to you. Professor Brown, please, can you share your experience on that? Because it's important for new sites to know that this is how things go. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Maxwell. And thank you, Professor Nodu, for inviting me to speak. I want to also join the others in appreciating the great talk by Professor Fatima and Professor from Ghana. So with regards to funding studies, knowing that in clinical trials, you are paid on a reimbursement basis. That is, you are paid for work that has been done. So until that work is done, you aren't paid. In some situations, it's not just the work that you have done, but you are paid only when all queries pertaining to a particular job have been cleared. Because when you do clinical trials, you enter your data in the electronic data capture system, they check, there are errors, correct this and that. So that even takes a longer period. Some sponsors will pay as work is done per week, say, or per month. This month, 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. The clearance or response to queries is different. While others, even if you work for 4 months, as long as there are outstanding queries, they will only pay you for situations in which data for which the queries have already been answered before you get paid. So it's quite challenging. Now, as has been said earlier on, there are start-off funds for clinical trials. And like Professor Nodu rightly said, some of these clinical trials, the start-off funds, they just fix it. Without even consulting you, is this adequate or not? They just fix it. You can negotiate other parts of the budget, but that start-off fund, somehow, they refuse to shift to say this is what they give for a start-off fund. And that money is really meant to help you put in place a few things that you need to start off that trial, So very often it's not much, and it's just to put in place things that you don't have yet are necessary for the trial. Again, before when the trial starts, you have to spending your money on some things, ethical approval, other regulatory issues from your pocket, and you only get paid after the trial starts. So if, for instance, sometimes you have you do all those things, and then eventually that trial does not take place, how do you get reimbursed for the money you have spent in preparing for the trial to start? So what have been my own approach? One is that when the start-off funds come, I keep some of it, not just for stationaries and other things we require. I keep some part of it to use for patient reimbursement, for patient transportation, patients feeding, because sometimes some of the clinical trials will involve PK studies that will involve a participant staying in the hospital for 4, 5, 6 hours. So I keep some money from the start-off funds to use to reimburse the patients or the participants, so that when the funds come, I'm able to use it very well. So subsequently, now the other point is that, again, in some studies, the sponsor pays for all the investigations. He just sends you a a vendor that comes, he sends you the kits, a vendor comes, takes the samples to the laboratory and analyzes them. In some others, you have to pay, especially when the samples are being analyzed within the country. You have to pay upfront for the analysis to be done. So in that situation, very often, you have to sign an MOU between you and the local laboratory. What I have done so far is that in such situations, I've had to negotiate the laboratory to say, look, we can't pay you upfront. We can't pay you every month, but there are delays in getting your funds. Even when the sponsor has paid you, in the era of TSC, there are delays in getting funds. So I have had to negotiate with the laboratory to say, can we pay you quarterly? Can we pay you quarterly? And somehow they seem to have agreed. So with that, even though the funds don't come in after the work has been done, it is quarterly payments. I'm able to get some. That gives me some time for the money to arrive for me to pay the labs for the laboratory investigations. Some other investigations, however, some other labs will not agree. And in that case, you need to look for money somewhere. And the only source of that money is one, the start-off funds. That's often a difficult time, the period of great inertia. But as the study rolls on, usually in the study budget, clinical trial budget, there is some funds for overhead costs. And that very often ranges between 18% overhead costs and 20%, 18% of the normal budget to 20% or sometimes 21% as overhead costs. So now the overhead costs are going to cover the other issues you need that are not directly catered for in the budget. Things like stationery, your printer, transport costs for you to carry a patient one place to the other, and a few other things. So what I do is that out of the overhead costs, the institution will take its admin charges. Like in my place, they take like 10%, but some organizations, some sponsors determine how much that admin charge will be. Like, for instance, the NIH will not give anything more than 8% as admin charges. So from the overhead costs, I'm able to separate the money for admin charge, and then from the remaining other money that's meant for overhead costs, I try to see that I don't spend the whole overhead costs on so many things. I see how I can get some money ahead so that while waiting for the next tranche of payment to come to reimburse the participants, or for payment to come to pay for laboratory costs or for imaging costs, some part of the overhead cost is left. I keep it aside for payments of the labs and for payments for reimbursements of the participants. Sometimes also, so I mentioned two sources of funds that help me to run the labs, the image, the participant reimbursement for the time spent for their work and their effort. Sometimes also I keep some of the money that's been kept that's meant for directly, let us say, for laboratory, refrigeration, the sampling, processing the sampling, centrifuging the sampling, and other things. I keep some of that money to use in paying the participants so that when more money comes, I'm able to shuffle things around with it. It involves a lot of calculating and mathematics, but somehow one gets around with it. So those are the main ways. But finally, goodwill. By the time your participants, if they are your patients, they trust in you, they believe in you, and they know that you've been able to pay them regularly. So even when there's a delay in payments, they know that the money will come. And at some instances in some occasions, I have had situations in which the startup funds are not big enough, are not enough to help me in paying. Even the overhead costs that come sometimes is not sufficient to handle patient participant reimbursement and some other things like investigations, I have had to tell the participant, look, this is what you are entitled to, because in the informed consent forms, the sponsors will insist that on the informed consent form, what is due the participant must be recorded there. So they know I'm entitled to $40 or $50 is equivalent in Naira at every visit. So they know it and they sign for. So I'm able to appeal to them that, look, this is what you're entitled to. However, we don't have enough funds now. So I've been able to sometimes pay them half of what is due them. So that when the full money comes, I reimburse them and everything is signed for. So they see that there is transparency. All right. And last burst of that, occasionally I spend some money from my pockets. But the receipts are there. So when eventually the sponsor pays that money through the CROs, I'm able to reimburse myself because the receipts are there as evidence. So that when I'm retiring this money to our institution, that's the evidence that the money was used judiciously. So I think I will stop there. In summary, the most difficult part is the beginning of the study, when you only have startup funds that the sponsor gives to you. But as the study goes on, they're able to get more money from the overhead costs to be able to keep and pay your participants, so that when money comes in, they're able to balance the accounts, and then your staff, your research, your co-investigator and other staff get reimbursed appropriately. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Brown. So quickly, we'll go to the next question. We're towards the top of the hour now. So please, Dr. Akinshete, can you quickly just let us know what your experience has been in determining the stipend to be paid to participants when during negotiations with CROs and sponsors, especially balancing the issue of want to avoid inducement and all that. Professor Dr. Kinshete, please.
Yeah, thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. I think that so there are two things we need to understand. There's a negotiation with the CRO, and then there is a negotiation with the sponsor. I would always encourage that PIs should, as much as possible, break protocols and speak to sponsors. When you start clinical trials, you imagine that CROs actually are looking out for your interest. As you move along, then you find that CROs are looking out for themselves. And so you as a PI, you have to look out for your institution, for the members of your team, and for your participants. And so that's the first thing. Second thing is that it is also important that at the early stages of a trial, there should be some degree of mentoring amongst institutions in a particular country. Because what that does is that you will protect the newer members of the team from exploitation, both from CROs and sponsors. Now, going to the issue of stipend, it's a delicate balance between trying to get what is fair to your participants and ensuring that you don't stretch it so much that that money becomes an inducement. So we've had trials in which we've negotiated very huge sums of money that will run into hundreds of thousands of naira. When you look at it, at a point in the lifespan of the trial, it will almost become inducements. Because when people are coming for a visit and they are earning close to 250,000 naira from a visit, then you have to take a step back, because at that material time, things may not go well when regulators come in. But we threw this question to NAFDAC regulators, investigators, and inspectors when they came for their last audit to my site in August. And NAFDAC says that whatever you feel is convenient for your participants and you are comfortable with it, that they will not frown at it. That they are not in the space where they will say that this is an inducement. That once you as a PI are comfortable with it, go ahead and let them know. And coming from that, what they've said now is that they are going to benchmark that no participant across sites in the country should get less than this. So that's one. Now, the second thing for us that we negotiate is that when the trial involves a parent bringing a child, we negotiate more for stipend as opposed to when it's just an adult. So for us, if you have adult trials, we will negotiate $50 as a baseline stipend. Once it's a child or an adolescent, we will not go less than $75, usually $100, because there's the lost opportunity to that parent. They have to pay transport fare for two people. There is inconvenience for two people, and all of that you factor into it. Usually, you will get pushback from CROs, but when you start engaging the sponsors, most times you will get to a midpoint that becomes palatable for all parties concerned. But I think that the parting thing for me is what Professor Onodu said earlier, which is what we're trying to do as a strategy now, is that yes, we are different sites. We have NDAs, but we're looking out for the interest of the same people who are Nigerians. And so it's best when you have a negotiation that cuts across institutions and you protect your participants in the same way. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kinshete. That was really quite listen. I know we've just gone past the hour, but please let's just hear Malamani Aminu. He is an accountant and he's been the one handling clinical trial, chasing the funds, through the university bursary at our center. So, Malam Aminu, the question will be this: what are the kinds of invoicing patterns that you've used or you become accustomed to in terms of clinical trials? What are those kinds of invoicing patterns, and what are the challenges? Or challenges, advantages, and disadvantages of the different types of invoicing patterns that CROs or sponsors may want to use?
Thank you, Prof. Good evening, everyone. And I want to appreciate all the prof that have spoken, and especially our own prof, Professor Unodu, who has been our mentor all this while. Just straight to the question. After we have had a robust budget acceptable to both the site and the sponsors, and the agreement has been sealed, the next thing is we swing into action. The clinical trial team start their work, and in most cases, the like one of our profs just said now, it is a reimbursable trial, a reimbursable research, not one that payment are made up front. So in most cases, the payment cycle is usually quarterly. So after a quarter, you send in an invoice. So there are basically two patterns of invoicing. The first is the invoice that is generated by the CRO or the sponsor, as the case may be. And the second is the site generated invoice. Talking about the CRO generated invoice, it is a situation where at the end of that payment cycle, the CRO sent in an invoice to the site that these are the activities in the clinical trial that your site have done, and look through it. If you're okay, sign and send back. This system of invoicing is basically good for first timers, because it will save their time, and it will serve as a learning platform for them. But other than that, for those that have been on clinical trial, it may not be the best for them. The reason is that for invoices that are generated by the CROs, there are every tendencies that some activities like unscheduled visits may not be captured. Sometimes we have experienced these two types of invoice patterns, that we have a case of serious adverse events, but the sponsors or the CRO took them as adverse event. And everybody that's involved in clinical trial knows that the cost of the two are very, very much different. So that will cost forth and back. And sometimes because of that, when we have invoices that are raised by the CROs, you find out that sometimes with this front and back, we will even, if we roll over to the next quarter, and we have not been able to resolve the issues on the first quarter. So that is the disadvantage of those invoices that are raised by the CRO. But the site-generated invoices, those are better, especially for those sites that are already used to the system. Wherein at the end of the quarter, and that is at the end of the payment cycle, you raise your invoice of activities yourself for reimbursement. So you know what you have done, and you have the agreed budget. You now list out all activities that are carried out, and then you push it to the CRO. And in that case, you save a lot of time. And secondly is that it helps to set the record straight, because the sponsors or the CROs, they have the EDC, they have the record of activities in the EDC system. They have it with them. For if there are things that are not straight, probably you have some activities like the unscheduled visits, the conditional procedures that you have carried out, and they are not recorded in the EDC. It is time for both the CRO and the site to reconcile. So that second pattern of invoicing gives room for this. So that is the advantage of the site generated invoice as against that the CRO generated invoice. So the site generated invoice, the site tends to it minimizes the loss of revenue as against the CRO generated invoice. The CRO generated invoice, they are always out to minimize cost to themselves, at your own expense, at the expense of your site. But if you are the one generating your invoice yourself, you will not conduct an activity and you will not report it. Definitely, if you conduct an activity, you definitely report it. But if they are the one generating the invoice, they may not capture things that they don't know. Of course, it's only those things that are in the system that they will capture, and that is where wasting of time and front and back comes in. So basically, those are the two patterns of invoicing: the CRO generated invoice and the site generated invoice. Both we have been used to using, and both have their advantages and disadvantages, like I have summarized, hoping that we'll be able to get the difference between the two of them. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Malam Aminu. This is a discussion that if we were to continue, I guess we'll be here for a very, very long time. So at this point, I'll just hand over to Professor Nodu to close us, and then also allow Professor Ebed, in case she has any additional comments. I guess this budgeting thing is something that is a recurring thing, and I guess we'll have to keep talking to ourselves about it. Over to you, Professor Nodu.
It's been a wonderful evening. I really want to thank all our speakers, for their experiential knowledge of the space and how they have freely shared, their experiences within in clinical trials. I want to particularly thank Professor Ebert. I would like to come to your center, actually. I like what you're doing, and I want to thank my sister Yvonne. We met in Ghana not so long ago. We belong to the same college, and you have really shared with us, how you're working. When you say that you have, what you shared about startup fee, we will try and follow through and see why the different, we have a different practice here. So that is why, these conversations are very important. I want to thank Professor Brown for the wonderful illustrations that you have given us of how you're using your startup fee and then your administrative fees as well, just to get by until you get paid. And I want to thank Professor Akinshete, for that wonderful addition. So many questions have been asked. I've noted them, and then I want to thank, of course, our coordinator of the clinical trial, this course, Professor Maxwell, and the admin, So I want to thank all the participants. I hope I haven't forgotten anyone. And Malama Aminu, of course, thank you so much, for the active participation and for sharing what we are doing at our site. I'm really, delighted about this training. We are learning a lot every evening, and then so it's been a wonderful time. I just want to say that we are going to write, there's going to be a short survey that will be sent to you. And we want this training that we are doing to culminate in a documentation of site readiness, partner site readiness for clinical trials. So we have looked at, we have created a survey instrument. The sponsor has also made an input and will be sharing that with the sites. Please pay attention to that and describe as closely as possible what you have in your site, so that when we write that paper, it will give us visibility for more clinical trials. Professor Ebert has talked about industry sponsored as well as investigator initiated clinical trial. We need to have documentation of what we have, in order to be able to participate in any of this. So I really want to thank everyone. It's been an exciting evening indeed, and we look forward to the next opportunity, next week. Thank you. Good night.
Thank
Good night.
you.
Thank
Thank you.
Thank you.
you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good
Good
night.
night.
Good night.
Night. Thank you.
Good night.
Okay,
Thank
Bye-bye.
good
you.
night.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
The
Excellent.
presence of
Thank
our
you,
desk officer,
everyone.
Dr.
Night.
Thank
Dr.
you,
Alayo
everyone.
Shokweko. Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Shokweko, for being with us. Thank you.
Thank you all.